Meantime, the United Nations and aid agencies have launched an appeal for $885 million to help nearly 5 million people in urgent need of food aid in Somalia. Among those are 310,000 children who are facing death due to malnutrition if they do not receive urgent help. Officials say ongoing aid efforts have been hampered by lack of funds, insecurity and further worsened by the El Nino weather phenomenon. The appeal is crucial and will benefit another 1.1 million people who have been displaced in Somalia due to fighting and the ongoing military operation against the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab. The areas worst affected by the displacement are Baidoa, Bosaso, Galkayo, Kismayo and the capital Mogadishu. Three people were killed in a grenade attack on a bar in the Burundi capital Bujumbura late on Monday, as the nation faces the prospect of a return to civil war. Pierre Nkurunziza, the police spokesman, said a senior police officer, a lawyer and a civil servant were killed in the attack that took place in the Buiza neighborhood. Witnesses said the attackers used a motorbike to get to the scene and to flee after the explosion. Police arrested several youth in the area after the attack on the bar that is popular with supporters of President Pierre Nkurunziza. UN officials say the crisis has brought the nation to the brink of a new civil war after it emerged from a 12-year ethnically fueled conflict just a decade ago. Burundi sank into a crisis last year after President Pierre Nkurunziza ran for a third term of office, which he secured in a disputed vote. Meanwhile, a report of the Committee on Regional Affairs on a petition by the Pan-African Lawyers Union on the political situation in Burundi is to be tabled at a plenary session of the East African Legislative Assembly in Arusha next week. Welcome back to Bottomline East Africa. The hashtag, as always, Bottomline E.A. Please get in touch with us at Yvonne Okwara at KTN News. We love to hear from you. Now, like we've been telling you, it's a month to the elections in Uganda. There are some new developments, so we'd like to get some further analysis on this. And for that and more, I hand you over to Solomon Serwanja, who's our reporter in Kampala, Uganda. Solomon, latest updates there. Of course, a lot of acrimony surrounding the use of BVR kits.
Absolutely. It's, today the Electoral Commission did launch it at Africana here. This is the new system they're going to use to authenticate the voters. You'll have to go to the polling station, then use and indeed it's something that has been questioned by different people, including the opposition, but also civil society organizations, Yvonne.
All right, okay, so I understand you have someone there with you to give us further analysis, Solomon?
Absolutely. Now, joining us tonight is Chris Kahero, who is the coordinator for the Citizen Coalition on Electoral Democracy in Uganda. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Bottomline East Africa. What are your thoughts about, the new biometric voter registration system?
Yes, our quick thoughts are that one, we welcome the development for the Electoral Commission to introduce biometrics in the election process. The biometrics, what they do is improve the timeliness of an election, as well as improve an efficiency of an election. But that seems to be contrary to the experiences that we've seen in other countries that have employed biometrics. Kenya in 2013 registered 57% failure rate of these biometrics. But a classic example is Ghana, where biometrics were introduced for verification purposes, and we had to see the election being pushed into a second day. Now, what does this mean? This essentially means that some people were disenfranchised in that process. Some people who came, the elderly, the biometrics could not read their thumbprint. So those were asked to leave the polling station. In other instances where people came with wet palms, the biometric machine could not read their thumbprints again. So those were also asked to leave the polling station, and they were not seen as authentic voters. So there are risks associated with the biometrics, and especially in a situation where you're introducing biometrics last minute and you haven't had time to pilot, test the equipment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So certainly we'll come back to that later, but maybe let's talk about the number. We'll have one polling station, we'll have one unit. Now you're talking about, for example, a polling station in Kampala, which has about 15,000 voters lining and queuing to vote, having to go through that. Isn't it likely to delay the voting process?
Not delaying the voting process alone, but even overloading the machine. What is the machine capacity? I think those technicalities need to be made clear, because what we saw in Kenya actually 2013 is that some machines malfunctioned because of the many voters. Many of the machines malfunctioned in the afternoon of the polling day. So is that a risk to consider? I think it is an imminent risk. Is it something that the Electoral Commission has taken care of in this instance? We have not received that communication.
We just have a couple of days, about 30 days to the D-Day, and the Electoral Commission is still struggling. Will there be enough time to train this, to use this equipment so that the whole process is smooth?
Now, we need to go back and reflect on the other countries that used the biometrics. We had a 2013, but I think the biometric system that was used in Kenya was tested in 2010, 3 years before the election. I think it was in Kajiado and another constituency during the referendum. In 2013 itself, Kenya did mock elections in selected constituencies just to make sure that the biometrics are working. But even then, the failure rate was 57%. So, will they work in this case, where we have the machines being introduced just 3 weeks to the election, and with no or little training having been concluded with the polling officials? That's a question for you and I to answer.
Well, good luck, Jonathan. In Nigeria, also had to go through the same pain. He had to wait for more than 5 hours when he tried to, put his stamp, and the system couldn't read his whole, biodata. So, where does this lead to?
Well, I think the Electoral Commission has a very big task ahead to communicate to communicate and inform the electorate how they're going to use these biometrics and for what purpose they have introduced these biometrics. Now, that is very important, especially in a context like Uganda's, where there is a lot of suspicion. When the voters see machines being introduced at the polling station, the first thing will be, oh, this is a way of manipulating the results of an election, which may not actually be the intention of the Electoral Commission. The intention of the Electoral Commission probably is to make this election more efficient, more transparent, but that might not be read that way by a common person. Now, there is need to communicate around the introduction of these biometrics, but there is also a lot of sensitization that is required at this moment for the electorate, for the people who are actually going to use the biometrics, the polling officials. Now, I know there is a challenge with knowledge retention, especially for the polling officials, and that's why maybe the Electoral Commission decided to introduce the biometrics last minute to train them so that they don't forget how these are supposed to be used. But there is a challenge with that in the event that the people who you're banking on to run the system do not actually show up. Do they have the technical competence? It's not just a matter of biometrics. It's not a straightforward technology like a mobile phone. This is different technology. So there is risks that could recur on the polling day.
Certainly those risks should be, attended to by the Electoral Commission. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us, Chris Kaheru, who is indeed the coordinator of the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda. Now, he was also at the launch of this system, Yvonne, and indeed these issues need to be addressed by the Electoral Commission. Whether indeed it will be a success, Yvonne, is just a question of time.
Thanks very much, Solomon Serwanja from Kampala, Uganda. Indeed, you're right. It is the hope that it will be the success and the hallmark of a free and fair election that's coming up in just a month, and that all of those addressed issues and concerns will be addressed. Now, Nigeria, already hit by low oil prices, faces a threat to its cocoa sector, with industry officials saying its few remaining grinders could close. Nigeria is the world's fourth largest cocoa producer, but that industry was among the first victims when the country's oil discovery in the 1950s led to other sectors being abandoned. The government is trying to draw farmers back to cocoa and boost production to diversify the economy. Zinzi Kibiku now reports.
The future of Nigeria's cocoa industry hangs in the balance as grinders in the country contemplate closing down their factories at a time when Africa's biggest economy has been hampered by a collapse in global oil prices. The rise in the cost of raw beans, tied with a sharp currency depreciation, has made it unattractive for them to tap export demand for butter. The plants face the risk of permanent closure, which could mean laying off workers and also affecting creditors.
Presently, running, we are up and down. We are presently running at about 50% capacity, and the facility has been improved from past year in terms of capacity, and we are improving the factory.
The Akure grinder is one of around only 3 now partially operating in Nigeria, processing less than 20,000 tons a year. Farm gate prices in Nigeria have risen to an all-time high of between 750,000 to 780,000 naira per ton.
I have been in this business for over 10 years, and during that time, I faced many challenges such as heavy rainfall, insect bites, and other hazards in the field. We are pleading with our representatives to talk to the government so that we can make good profits.
Processors are also facing dollar shortages as grinders have to source hard currency from black markets to pay for beans, while proceeds from exports are receiving through the official market, which does not compensate for the weaker naira.
The CBN has to bring that back, where exporters in Nigeria can use their foreign exchange as they like, as we have it before the recent crisis in about 3 or 4, 5 months ago. Once that regime is back, we are able to take advantage of depreciation in naira, as it affects the price of buying cocoa. Farmers want more price for their cocoa because naira has been devaluated, but we are unable to take that advantage in terms of selling the dollar. So if CBN remove that policy, then I can tell you that that will help.
Nigerian economist Bismarck Riwane says the falling naira is making it difficult for grinders to keep machines running, even though a weak exchange rate is good for exporters.
The equipment which they are using, which are the grinders, are imported equipment. The spare parts are imported. And so if the value of the currency depreciates, they will need more naira to buy the dollars to buy those spare parts. And that will be affecting their ability to grind cocoa into cocoa paste. But generally speaking, the lower a country's currency, the more attractive its local commodities.
Africa's biggest economy is working on agricultural commodities, including cocoa, to help plug shortfalls from oil revenues. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.